So welcome to our today's class again, which is on working capital management. And in this case is a continuation of where we were in our previous class. Now on working capital management, I said is the administration and policy guidelines on current assets and current liabilities. Whereby in this case, we say the company will be managing inventory, will also be managing the debtors, will also be managing the creditor, the cash, before we also get to the creditors. Those are the major ones that we'll now be able to talk about in that regard. So we were able to talk about the inventory management, and today I want to finalize on the debtors and also on the cash management. So before we get to the debtors, let's talk about the cash management. Cash management. Cash management. Cash management. Now, in this case, there are two methods or two models that are used in managing cash. So we have number one, what we call the BOMODS, cash management model, cash management model. And then number two, we have what we call the Miller and Hall model. BOMODS and cash, BOMODS and what we call the Miller and the all what? Cash management model. So we can begin with the first one, which is the BOMODS cash management model. The BOMODS cash management model. The BOMODS cash management model. BOMODS cash management model. Now this one was developed out of the economic order quantity. See, tulisoma economic order quantity. It was developed out of the economic order quantity. And this is what we said. For economic order quantity, that is on the inventory. Remember we say the EOQ is 2RS over what? Over 8. That was on that case. So in this case, we are trying to manage the cash. When we talk of the management of cash, you have to come up with what we call the optimal cash balance. When we talk of optimal cash balance, ile pesa si mingi na si kidogo, iko hapo katikati. Sawa sawa. Remember in this case, we have the lower cash and we have the upper cash. But for the BOMODS in this case, it came up with what we call the optimal cash balance. Ile mali unafaa kupata pesa iko si mingi na si kidogo. In that case, we also call it the target value. So for the organization to know the optimal cash balance, which is denoted by C, it is normally 2FT all over K. And then you take the what? Square root. Which in that case, ukiangalia is not different from this one. As I've said, it was developed out of the economic what? Order quantity. So you can write and say, the model was developed out of economic order quantity. Method was developed out of the economic order quantity. Out of economic order quantity. Economic order quantity. Of the inventory control. Of the inventory control. Of the inventory control. Of the inventory control. Now with that, you can write the formula. You can write the formula. That is C is equals to 2FT all over K. Where C is the optimal cash balance. C is the optimal cash balance. F is the total cash, total amount of cash required. Total amount of cash required for the entire period. Total amount of cash required for the the total amount of cash required for the period. F is the fixed transaction cost per transaction, or the one I had said C. T is the total amount of cash required for the entire period. F is the fixed transaction cost per transaction, fixed transaction cost per transaction, and then K is the interest rate or the opportunity cost. The interest rate or the opportunity cost. Interest rate or the opportunity cost. With that, we can try an example. The same. And the example we're doing in the sitting of May 2017. May 2017. May 2017, question number 5C. May 2017, question 5C. May 2017, question 5C. May 2017, question 5C. Now, ABC Limited expects to make a payments of 4.5 in the coming year. The firm's investment in marketable securities generates an annual return of 20%, and the firm incurs a cost of 20% per transaction when buying or selling the securities. The minimum cash balance maintained by this company at all times is 10,000. You are required, using the BOMOL's cash management model, determine the ABC optimal cash balance. So for you to get the optimal cash balance, optimal cash balance, which is Q, we've said it's 2FT all over what? Okay, then you take the square root. Where in this case, our F, the fixed transaction cost per transaction, we know is series what? 20. We also have T, the amount required is, or the payment to be made was of 4 point what? And we also have the interest rate. The interest rate, which is K, is 20 what? %. So in that case, it will be 2. You multiply by 4.5 thousand, then you divide by 0.2 and you take the square root. How much is it giving you? How much is it giving you? Inakupea ngapi? Yes, how much is it giving you? Yes? Napata ngapi? Remember, here you also multiply by 20. Don't forget to multiply by 20. Multiply by 20. 20, we are talking about the fixed transaction cost. The fixed transaction cost. So how much are you getting from that? How much are you getting from that? Yes? 30,000. So that is the optimal cash balance, C. Are we together? In other cases, they may also ask you the number of transfers. The number of transfers. The number of transfers in this case will be given by taking the total amount, that is the T, you divide by the economic what? No, not the economic, but the number of what? Days in a year, which in that case will be 4.5. You divide days in a year, we've been told is 300 and what? 60 days, which in that case itakuwa ngapi? Yes? 12.500. 12,500 transfers. That is how you get that. Then Roman number 3, they may also ask you the average cash balance, of which I think they have asked. The average cash balance, the average cash balance, the other average cash balance. In this case, will be given by the average cash balance will be given by average cash balance. Now, the average cash balance in this case will be the total. Now, the number of transfers is the one that have been wrong. This one you have to divide by, this is one you have to divide by the optimal cash balance, which is 30,000, for you to know the number of days. So, yes, that one you have to divide by 30,000. Ndio sasa for the average cash balance, you have to take the total, you divide by the economic what? You divide by the number of what? Number of days. So in this case, it will be 4.5. You divide by the number of days. In that case, you have told me is 300 and what? And therefore it will be 12. So how many transfers are we having here? Yes? 150 transfers. Then we also ask about the relevant cost. Relevant cost. When we talk about the relevant cost, in this case will just be equal to the ordering cost. Ordering cost, you add the ordering cost. And the ordering cost in this case, you get it by taking T all over C, then you multiply by F, then this one will be a half C, you multiply by K, where in this case, the ordering cost should be equal to the ordering what? Ordering cost, where in that case, T was 4.5 million, you divide by what is the optimal cash balance? 30. Then you multiply by 20 plus a half, you multiply by 30,000. Then you multiply by 0.2. Sawa sawa. So fanya kwanza ya the ordering cost. Niambie ni ngapi? Ordering cost is giving you how much? 3,000. So kumaanisha hata hii ingine itakupea ngapi? Is it giving you 3,000? So at the end of it, the relevant cost will be 6,000. That is the average or the relevant cost. Oh, we've confused it. Huh? We've done, okay, this was Roman 2. This was Roman 4. And then Roman number 3, they're asking you to look for the conversion, the cash conversion what? Cash conversion cycle. The cash conversion cycle. Now the cash conversion cycle in this case is the number of days that the cash will be converted into marketable securities and then being received back as what? Cash again. So that is what we call the conversion cycle. And the conversion cycle in this case we've been given the minimum cash balance. Kumaanisha the cash is being converted ikifika 10,000. Hapo ndo unai-convert tena to what? Marketable securities. Are we together? Are we together? So what will be the cash conversion cycle then? If in this case, the cash is being converted with how much? Within what? 10,000. So in this case, it is being converted out of what we call the economic order what? Quantities. Ndio, ikifika hapo, we want to know the number of times in which they will be converting that. So if in a year, within a year, the economic order quantity here, or the optimal cash balance within 360 days is how much? Is the 360 days, si ndio? Utakuja ujiulize, how about 10,000? Itakuwa for how many days? Sawa sawa. So in that case, it will be 10,000. You multiply by 360, and then you divide by 30,000. So how many days is it giving you? 120 days. And therefore, the Roman number 3 is how many days? 120 days. So this was Roman number 2. This was Roman number 4. This one was not there. I've just done it in that regard. So it's supposed to be done that way. Sawa sawa. Supposed to be done that way. So the other model is model number 2, which is now Miller and Orr. Miller and Orr model. Miller and Orr model. Now for the Miller and Orr model, in this case was now developed out of the limitations of these other model. And which are these limitations of this model here? Now, this model assumes that the rate of cash is going to be constant all over the period. It also assumes that the amount of cash that is required for the whole year will never change. Sawa sawa, will just be the same. It does not vary. So as a result of those limitations of the Bomos model, this other one was also developed, where in this case, this is what the Miller explained. We have that. We have that. So in this case, this is what we call the upper limit, which is denoted by H. This is the target or optimal cash balance. Target or optimal cash balance. And then akakuja na ingine inaitwa lower limit, which in this case is represented by, and this one is represented by Z. That one is represented by Z. So in this case, we have time, and this is the cash balance. So this is what Miller said. Alisema ukipata pesa ikuje ifike hapa to the upper limit. Ikuje ifike hapa, that money should be converted into marketable securities. What do we mean when we talk of marketable securities? Marketable securities are those investment securities that can be converted into cash immediately. Zenye unaweza convert into cash immediately, like bonds, treasury bills, sawa sawa. So in that case, he said after you reach the maximum, ni kumaanisha in that case you can now convert the money into what? Marketable security. Sawa sawa. So ni kumaanisha they are now in securities. So zikiteremka zikuje zipite hapa up to the lower level, lower limit, alisema sasa, now that they are in marketable securities, you can now convert them back into what? Into cash. Sawa sawa, unairudisha tena into cash. And then if at the optimal cash balance, alisema there you're not supposed to do what? Anything. So lazima ikuwe hivyo. So in that case, that is in this case, this amount, that is H minus Z, it must be converted into what? Marketable securities. And in this case, you are converting them back into what? Marketable securities. Sawa sawa. That is what that one he made. And therefore, he said for you to get the optimal cash balance, which is Z, he said in that case, you can get it by taking the 3B variance, you divide by 4I, then power 1/3, you add lower limit. You add lower limit. That is how he said you can get the optimal cash balance, where B is fixed transaction cost per transaction. This is the variance of daily cash flows. I is the daily interest rate, and then L is the lower cash limit. L is the lower cash limit. L is the lower cash limit. S is the lower cash limit. So in this case, this is how Miller and all was able to explain in that case. Kasema, if you want to get the optimal cash balance, you will get it by that. So alisema if you reach the maximum, that is the upper limit, in that case, you are supposed to convert that money into marketable securities. And then if it may reach to the minimum, that is the lower cash balance, you convert it back into what? Into cash. So he also, in this case, he also said that for you to get now this upper cash limit, which is 8, you can get the upper cash limit by taking 3Z minus 2L. 3Z minus 2L. When you talk of Z, in this case, you have said is the maximum, the optimal cash balance. Then when you also talk about L, is the lower what? Cash balance. He also said, if you are asked about the average cash balance, you take it by getting 4Z minus L, then you divide by what? 4Z minus L, you divide by minus that, you divide by 3. Then the last one was on the spread. The spread is just the difference between the maximum and the minimum. So in that case, he said you take it by getting the L, you minus what? M. H, you minus the L. H, you minus the L. So in that case, we can also have an example on the same. Can also have an example on the same. Can also have an example on the same. Example, and you write. Example, you write. Examples, and you write. The following information relates to Bawabu traders. Following information relates to Bawabu traders. Bawabu traders. Number one. Following information relates to Bawabu traders. Number one, the minimum cash balance. The minimum cash balance. Minimum cash balance is shillings 8,000. Shillings 8,000. The shillings 8,000. Number two, variances of the variances of the daily cash flows of the daily cash flows of the daily cash flows is 4 million 4 million 4 million is 4 million, which is equivalent to a standard deviation of which is equivalent to a standard deviation of 2,000 per day. 2,000 per day. 2,000 per day. Also add the transaction cost per transaction, per transaction is shillings 50. Shillings 50 is shillings 50. Shillings 50. Same. The interest rate per annum, the interest rate per annum is 10%. The interest rate per annum is 10%. You are required not 10%, up 10%. Yes, talk of 10%, no problem. Required determine Roman 1, the optimal cash balance. B, the upper cash limit. C, you also have the average cash balance. And number 4, number D, the what we call the spread. So in that case, let's begin with the first one. Where in this case, we want to get the what we call the standard deviation, not the optimal cash balance. Now for the optimal cash balance, we've said you get it by taking 3B standard deviation, you divide by 4I, then you multiply by 1/3, then you add the what? L. So in our case, we know B is the fixed transaction cost per transaction, which is 50. So that's how. Then we also know that our variance, which is variance, the daily variance we've been given as what? 4 million. And then we have also been given the interest rate, which was 10% per annum. But in our case, in this case, we said is the daily interest rate. And the daily interest rate in that case, we have to divide by the number of days in a what? In a year. So. And then the other one is lower cash balance, which is the lower limit, is 8,000, the minimum cash balance. Are we together? Now, in this case, remember, for you to get variance, you normally square the what? The standard deviations. Ni ukweli? So wanaweza kupea the standard deviation. In this case, it's just a confusion. Walikuwa wanataka kuconfuse in the sense that wakuwekee hii ushindwe ni gani utatumia. But in that case, you are supposed to use the what? Variance, which is just the square of this one. If you square 2,000, you just get 4 millions. So in that case, now we can be able to get the value, which in that case, it will be given by 3, you multiply by 50, multiply by 4 million. 3, you multiply by 50, multiply by 50, you multiply by 4 million, then you multiply by, that is 4 million, you divide by 4, you multiply by 10%, which is 0.1, divide by 365, right? Then after that, you now add, you multiply by what? Power 1/3, then you add 8,000. So what will be the optimal cash balance? So to get the value, in this case, you take 3, you multiply by 50, you multiply by 4 million, then you divide by 4, you multiply by 0.1, you divide by 365 days in a year, then in that case, you can get the 3 and root of answer, and root of answer, where you will also add 8,000, which in that case, you will get 16,180.78. That is the optimal cash balance. That is the optimal cash balance. Then Roman number 2, the Roman number 2, on the Roman number 2, we also require to look for what we call, the upper limit, which is 8. So to get H, we've said is 3Z minus 2L. Z is our optimal cash balance, so it will be 3. You multiply by 16,180.78, then you minus 2, you multiply by 8,000, which in that case, if I multiply by 3, then I minus 16,000. In that case, this one will be 32,542. That is 0.33. Then see, you also require to get the average cash balance. An average cash balance will be given by, average cash balance is 4Z minus L, then you divide by what? 3. And a Z in this case is 4, you multiply by. The Z in that case is 16,180.78. You minus 8,000, then you divide by 3, which in that case it is 4, multiply by 16,180.78 minus 8,000, then you divide by 3, which in that case is 18,907.71. That is the average. So number D is the spread, and to get the spread in this case will be 8 minus the lower what? The difference between the maximum and the minimum. And the maximum in this case will be of how much? Is H, which is 32,542.33 minus the minimum, which was 8,000. So 32,542.33 minus 8,000, in that case is 24,542.33. That is now what we call in the spread. That is how you look for the spread. That is how you look for the spread. So what you need to understand is just the formula. And once you understand the formulas, you'll be able to get the values. Then the last area that I want also to talk about is on the data's management. On the data's management. Now, on the data's management, in this case is whereby you are managing the data. And on management of the data, in this case, you need to come up with what we call the average collection period. Could you, after this time is when I'm supposed to collect the amount of money. So why should, in this case, because the data are rising from what we call the data, the credit sales, why should a company sell on the credit? The company will sell on credit if they want to increase the volume of what? The sales. If also they want to attract more customers. If also they want to avoid the stock what? Getting obsolete. In that case, that is when they will sell on credit. And that's why an organization is required to manage its cash, or to manage its debtors in that regard. So in managing its cash, there is some of the what we call in the working capital management policies. And the working capital policies in this case is whereby you give them a defined time that they are supposed to make what? The payments of those goods. So we can try an example to see on how you're supposed to go on the what? On the same. An example. And the last, that is the example on November 2017. November 2017. November 2017. November 2017. Question number 1C. November 2017. November 2017, question 1C. Now the following data relates to Takimati Limited. We have the selling price per unit, variable cost per unit, fixed cost per unit, annual credit sales units, credit collection period, and we also have the rate period, the correction period and rate of the return. The company is considering the change its policy that would relax its credit policy. Then in this case, additional information, we've been told the sales were expected to increase by 20%. Collection period would change to 3 months. The debtors collection, the bad debt losses would be expected to be 3% of the increased sales, and collection costs were expected to increase by what we call the 20,000. You are required to advise the company on whether to relax the credit policy. When we talk of relaxing the credit policy, they want to introduce a new policy. There is the old policy and there is the new policy. Are we together? And the determinant of this is now by computing the profits. Okay, compute the profit before relaxing the policy and after relaxing the policy. So if the profit increases in that case, ni kumaanisha they can relax. You wakirelax the policy, the profit is going to increase. Sindio? Kama ita increase, they supposed to maintain the what? That policy. So in this case, I will have for the current policy, and then we'll also have the new what? New policy. The current policy and the new policy. Current policy. Then we'll also have the new what? New policy. Current policy and new policy. So I've said in this case, we just look for the profits. So to answer sales. So for the sales, we were given the sales we were given there. Sales we were given there. The sales we were given there. What was the amount of sales there? 300. So you take 300. Let me use shillings in thousands. Shillings in thousands. So you will take 300,000. You multiply by the unit, the selling price per unit, which is 80. shillings. In that case, it will give you what? 24,000. Sindio? That is before they had relaxed the policy. If they relax the policy, the sales will increase by how much? 20? On additional information number 1, it increase na 20%. So you just take 120, you multiply by what? 24,000. Itakupea ngapi? Yes? 28,800. Sawa. Are we together? Then from there, you also less the cost of sales. And the cost of sales in this case, we have the variable cost. Now, the variable cost in this case was 50 shillings, 50,000 per what? Per unit. And unit was 30 what? The units were 300,000. So we'll also take 300,000. You multiply by 50. Itakupea ngapi? 10,000. Remember that one you are supposed to less. And also this one will now, remember, they vary with sales, the variable cost. You also multiply by 125% of the same, 15,000. Itakupea ngapi? 18,000. Then we also have the fixed cost. So fixed cost will just be 300,000. You multiply by how many units? 10 units, which in that case itakuwa ngapi? 3,000 and also 3,000, which in that case it will not change. Sindio? Are we together? Fixed cost in a remaining is the same all through. So what will be our gross profit? This one is 6,000. And this one 70, 27, no, 7,800, 7,800. So. Then after that, you less the expenses now. Expenses. Now for the old policy, when you take on the expenses, were we given any cost? Were there any, what we call the bad debts? Hazikuwa, lakini on the new course atakuwa na bad debts. Bad debts, sindio? Bad debts zangapi? It will be, on the new policy, it will be 3% of the increased what? And the increased sales ilikuwa ngapi? This minus this. What is 28? The increased sales. What is 28,800 minus 24,000? 48,100. So it will just be 3% of 48. Inakupea ngapi? 140? 144 to 144. And then the last one is now what we call the what? Opportunity cost. So opportunity cost. Now, how will you get the opportunity cost in this case? The opportunity cost, you just take the credit sales. You multiply by the opportunity cost, you get the credit sales, you multiply by the average collection period, and then you divide by the number of days in a year. Then you multiply by the rate. So you multiply by the rate. And this is the rate of return. So credit sales in our case here, it was 24,000. You multiply by the average collection period. And average collection period ilikuwa ya ngapi? How many months? 2 months. And what is the number of months in a year? Because we are using months, hapo utatumia 2 months. Sawa. Which is how much? 12. Sawa. After you get that, you multiply by the rate of capital of return, which was 16 So itakupea ngapi? 16%. Yes? 620. 640. Sawa. Then also we have what we call the what? Opportunity cost for this one. You also take the credit sales, 28,800. You multiply by the average collection period, ilikuwa increase. Ina increase to how much? So it is 3 all over 12. Then you multiply by 16 what? Percent. Inakupea ngapi? 1150. Hivyo 1150. Oh, this was, yes, in 1152. It's supposed to be that case. Since how? Are we together? Then from there, you can also less another expense that we've seen there. On the second one, collection costs were expected to increase by 20 what? 20,000. So hapa kuna pia collection what? Collection costs. And this is only on the new policy, which is 20. So with that now, you can get the profits before tax. Profit before tax. Yakuwa ngapi? Ya kwanza 5360. Ya pili 6484. So kama kungekuwa na tax ungeless ndio upate profit after what? Tax. Lakini inawakeza kukuwa na tax rates. Unaona hakuna. Are we together? So in that case, what now could be the advice? Ukiangalia if we relax the credit policy, the profit is going to increase. Sawa. So the advice in this case, the advice is should relax. The credit policy, since it will increase profit by how much? It will increase profit by how much? Yes? The difference unapata ngapi? 1124. That is now the advice. Umeelewa sasa? Yes, that is how you're supposed to do that. And that is all on the working capital management. So we'll continue from there.